These are typical dilemmas of a declining empire. It has arranged its affairs over the years, each time solving a problem, but not being aware that now you have created, by their solution, a vulnerability so that the next problem will be a little more difficult because of its ramifications. And we are now at a point where this is literally crashing in on us. We have a stock market that is out of control, so far rising, but the gap between that and the mass of the people who don't own significant amounts of shares or none at all is becoming a political problem. So the very success of the stock market is a failure in the larger political system.
大家好，这里是华人看世界 CNView 频道。今天我们邀请理查德·沃尔夫教授深入拆解美国正在经历的多种危机，从对伊朗的经济制裁到油价上涨、日元贬值和美国国债抛售，一个看似局部的决定，为什么会迅速传导到全球金融市场，甚至冲击美国的住房和选举？更值得警惕的是，美国曾经惯用的制裁、战争与金融优势，如今似乎越来越难以奏效。伊朗、俄罗斯、中国以及美国的传统盟友正在搭建自己的技术、贸易、支付和安全体系。沃尔夫教授认为，这不只是一次普通的经济衰退，也不只是左右两党的政治争执，而是美帝国长期积累的结构性问题集中爆发。美国还能否维持过去的霸权地位？欧洲会不会在能源、战争与经济压力下重新选择方向？本期节目，我们将从经济连锁反应讲到全球秩序重组，看看一个帝国如何在不断解决危机的同时，制造出更大的危机。
Welcome back. Professor Richard Wolff joins us today to discuss the United States and its, trying to find its new position in the world. So thank you for coming back. I see Trump announced economic D-Day against Iran, and shortly thereafter, Scott Bessent made a comment that he can't understand why oil prices are going up. So again, this also, it does seem absurd, but it did make me think, though, about the unintended consequences, of these economic sanctions, because sanctions these days, they're thrown away quite carelessly, and also this is happening at a time when the U.S. economy itself is in big trouble. Not just the U.S. economy, but indeed the entire economic model of the United States, which allows it to have such a exorbitant privilege in the world. So I was just wondering, given that also other alternatives are being set up in other parts of the world to prepare for a possible economic crisis in the U.S. or simply prepare for being subjected by sanctions themselves, what do you think are the possible unintended consequences of all these sanctions?
Well, my guess is that the metaphor that captures best in my brain so far what's going on is the metaphor about, and I don't even know if this is a true representation or not, but it's the metaphor of the dikes that hold back the sea in the Netherlands, and the story of the young child who discovers a hole that's letting some water come through, and puts his finger in the hole to prevent the water from coming in, and then notices that the very result of his putting his finger in is that another hole opens up, a few yards away, and then now he has to reach for the other hole, and then it's too much. That's what's happening here. I think what people don't understand is that the world has now reached a point where we have a genuine global economy in which literally every part is complexly linked to every other part, either by imports or exports or capital movements, one thing or another, directly, indirectly. Therefore, any kind of major disruption anywhere ramifies because it is linked in incredible ways all over the world. And this should have been understood but it wasn't. If, for example, the world multiplies indebtedness, the indebtedness of a government, the indebtedness of the corporate sector, and the indebtedness of households, and if the money is flowing in from all over the world through, say, the banking system into the borrowers, then a default anywhere ramifies right away to far-flung people who may be holding disproportionate amounts of that kind of security that is affected by that kind of a default. And then there are many other ramifications. I'm going to give you one from the recent days. With the rising price of oil, with the disruption that is crystal clear of the oil passages out of the Gulf of, the Persian Gulf through because of the Strait of Hormuz, places like Japan and South Korea and other Asian nations have been having trouble getting the oil and been paying high current prices for that oil. Well, that happened to hit Japan at a time when its overall situation was making it more and more dependent on funding through the yen the higher costs coming out of the trouble in Iran. Well, they couldn't really do it with their current finances. So they began to do something which in a way could have been predicted, may well have been predicted, but I think falls under your heading of unintended consequences. A declining yen confronting rising prices of oil that they would have to pay for by changing their yen into dollars or whatever currency the oil is sold into them. And that would depress the yen beyond its already low level. And now that would have disruptive effects. Japan remains the third or fourth largest economy in the world. It is an export-driven economy. A declining yen raises all kinds of problems elsewhere in the world. And this is just going to multiply. It led the treasurer of the United States, Mr. Besson, to arrange a bizarre loan, a loan of $22 billion, if I have the numbers correct, to Japan in the form of euros to enable the Japanese to buy the high-priced oil without further depressing the yen to do so. Okay, he fixed it. But now there are new problems. It turns out that inside the politics of the United States, this can be portrayed as having not the money to take care of thousands of local problems that are very urgent here. We don't have the $22 billion for that, but we do have it to bail the Japanese thousands of miles away from a currency problem for most American voters. This is not good for Mr. Trump's reelection, which is only a few weeks away at this point. This is very bad. So he's trying to plug in. Give you another example. One of the things Japan was doing, trying to cope with the declining yen and the problems that Japan risks a falling yen setting off around the world in its prime markets, was they decided to avoid having to expend more yen for high-priced oil by selling their accumulated U.S. Treasury bonds. They are the world's largest creditor of the United States. Over $1 trillion they own of U.S. They started selling them. Well, again, without being too detailed, to sell them quickly, which they had to do, they dropped the price. If you drop the price of the U.S. Treasury, up go the interest rates on 30-year bonds. Well, a rising interest rate on 30-year bonds puts them in a stiff competition with the only other 30-year instrument in this country, which are long-term home mortgages. A rising interest rate on the Treasury damages the housing market. That's one of the most important markets in a consumer-driven economy like the United States, and therefore is a recessionary cause. You begin to get the picture. You're solving one problem, and then you're doing something which, in fact, worsens another problem between politics and economics. And again, this is something you and I have discussed. These are typical dilemmas of a declining empire. It has arranged its affairs over the years, each time solving a problem, but not being aware that now you have created, by the solution, a vulnerability so that the next problem will be a little more difficult because of its ramifications. And we are now at a point where this is literally crashing in on us. We have a stock market that is out of control, so far rising, but the gap between that and the mass of the people who don't own significant amounts of shares or none at all is becoming a political problem. So the very success of the stock market is a failure in the larger political system. And the only thing comparable in this country, and it is related to all of this, is the fact that in recent elections, it has become clear that being supported by the number one financial lobby in this country right now, AIPAC, the lobbying connected to Israel, it is now the kiss of death.
这场对话真正讨论的并不只是伊朗战争、油价上涨或者某一届政府的政策得失。理查德·沃尔夫教授试图提醒我们的是一个更深层的问题：当一个国家把自己置于全球体系的中心，却又拒绝承认自身正在变化时，他所采取的每一次补救措施，都可能变成下一场危机的起点。制裁就是最典型的例子。过去，美国常常把制裁当成一种低成本的施压工具，仿佛只要切断贸易、金融和能源渠道，对手就会被迫让步。但在今天这个高度相互依存的世界里，制裁从来不会只影响被制裁的一方。油价上涨会传导到运输、制造、食品和居民生活，货币贬值会迫使国家抛售资产，资产抛售又会推高利率，冲击房地产和金融市场。一个看似局部的决定，最终可能绕了一大圈，反过来伤及自身。这就是大堤上的漏洞堵住一个缺口，旁边可能出现新的裂缝。解决眼前的问题，却把代价推向更远的地方。日本为了购买高价能源而承受汇率压力，抛售美国国债，美国国债收益率上升，又冲击住房贷款和消费市场。美国政府或许暂时缓解了某个盟友的燃眉之急，却同时暴露出国内财政捉襟见肘、政策彼此冲突的现实。经济从来不是一张可以随意拉扯的纸，而是一张由债务、货币、贸易、就业和民众预期共同织成的网。更值得警惕的是，金融市场的繁荣已经越来越不能代表普通人的生活。股市不断上涨，拥有大量股票的人获得更多财富，没有资产或者只有少量资产的人却要面对住房、医疗、教育和食品成本的持续压力。当一个国家的经济成绩主要体现在少数人的账户里，而大多数人感受不到生活改善时，经济问题就必然会转化为政治问题。股市越是热闹，贫富之间的落差就越刺眼，民众对于传统政党的失望也就越深。所以今天美国政治中最明显的变化，并不一定是民众突然集体接受了某种完整的意识形态，而是越来越多人对现有资本主义秩序失去了信心。年轻人尤其如此，他们出生在冷战结束之后，却没有等来承诺中的稳定生活。他们面对的是沉重的债务、昂贵的住房、缺乏保障的工作，以及一场场看不到尽头的战争。对他们来说，过去那套关于美国繁荣和全球领导力的叙事已经无法解释眼前的现实。这也解释了为什么一些进步派候选人能够获得关注，他们未必已经提出了成熟完整的替代方案。 但至少表达了改变现状的愿望，承认政府必须承担更多责任，承认普通人的困境是真实存在的。相比之下，传统政治精英仍然沉浸在旧有的权力语言里，只会重复胜利、强大和复兴，却很少正面回答一个简单的问题：这些宏大的国家目标究竟给普通人带来了什么？教授提出帝国衰落这一框架，意义正在于他把许多分散的现象连接了起来。美国仍然拥有庞大的经济体量、先进的科技、强大的军事实力和丰富的资源，但实力的存在不等于战略上的清醒，更不等于可以永远维持过去的特权。第二次世界大战之后，美国继承了欧洲殖民体系留下的大量资源和影响力，又借助美元、军事同盟和国际机构，建立起以自身为核心的世界秩序。几十年的成功逐渐变成一种惯性，也变成一种错觉。无论出现什么问题，美国总能凭借财富和力量把危机拖过去。但世界已经不是过去的世界，越来越多国家正在建设自己的工业体系、技术平台、支付方式、金融机构、交通走廊和安全安排。他们未必形成了一个完全统一的阵营，却都在做同一件事，那就是降低对单一中心的依赖。美国的盟友也开始意识到，把自身安全、能源和经济全部寄托在一个越来越不稳定、越来越强硬的中心身上，风险正在不断增加。所谓盟友关系，一旦从合作变成单方面索取，就会失去原有的吸引力。这场转型也意味着，世界正在从过去的新自由主义全球化转向更加激烈的经济民族主义。曾经被奉为圭臬的自由贸易和市场万能论，正在被关税、补贴、产业干预和国家资本所取代。问题在于，放弃旧规则并不自动意味着建立了更好的新秩序。如果国际法、贸易规则和基本的人道原则都可以根据强弱随意解释，那么最终被摧毁的不只是某个国家的声誉，而是所有国家赖以避免冲突升级的最低限度共识。因此，这场对话最值得我们记住的，并不是某个政客是否会在选举中获胜，也不是某个国家会不会立刻改变阵营，而是一个更基本的判断：真正的衰落往往不是资源突然消失，而是制度失去修正错误的能力。不是所有人同时变得贫穷，而是财富依然存在，却越来越无法转化为社会的安全感、公平感和未来感。一个国家如果只会用制裁回应制裁，用战争回应失败，用借债掩盖财政问题，用宣传掩盖民众的不满，那么它或许还能维持一段时间的表面强势，却很难真正解决内部矛盾。相反，真正有生命力的社会必须敢于承认失败，重新审视自身的利益分配，也必须允许不同群体通过和平、合法的方式参与政治选择。否则，压抑的失望情绪就会不断寻找出口，最终以更加激烈、更加极化的方式爆发出来。对于普通观众来说，我们也许无法左右大国的战略，却可以保持判断力。面对任何局势一切正常的口号，都应该追问谁在承担代价，谁在获得收益。面对任何只要继续施压就能解决问题的承诺，都应该追问这个办法过去是否奏效。新的后果又会由谁承担？只有把这些问题问清楚，我们才不会被短期的市场涨跌、政治口号和情绪对立牵着走。世界正在经历一次深刻重组，美国也正在面对自身无法回避的选择。它可以继续依赖旧有特权，试图用更强硬的手段阻止变化，也可以承认世界已经进入多中心时代，在平等、合作和相互尊重的基础上重新定位自己。前一条路可能带来更多冲突，后一条路虽然艰难，却更有可能为美国也为全世界保留和平调整的空间。这期内容如果引发了你的思考，欢迎在评论区谈谈。你认为美国的变化究竟是一次周期性危机，还是一个时代正在结束的信号？你又怎么看待制裁战争和经济脱钩对普通人生活的影响？感谢你的观看，我们下期继续从国际局势与经济变局中寻找真相。欢迎点赞订阅，查看更多精彩视频。